It's also, they need to start managing their time, like plan it out. This time is always bad because they have multiple assignments in their lecture.
Yeah.
Through the mic?
Yeah, so
Okay. Hi, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today for this special event on just before International Women's Day. And we've titled this in terms of making gains for gender justice, lessons from women's movements in South Asia. Because this is a talk that is being hosted by Sustaining Power for Women's Rights Super. It's a project that is a 5-year ESRC funded work on looking at how women activists and women's movements sustain their activism and deal with backlash. We also want to really privilege the voices of activists, women activists who are on the forefront of dealing with this backlash. And this is why we have our really amazing panel that we'll introduce to you in a minute. So just wanted to say a very big thanks to all our panelists, especially because they really are, fighting on the ground and every day. And I'm sure we'll have a lot to learn from them, especially in the light of what is happening in the world today. So I'll hand over to Professor Anu Joshi, who is our Director of Research and also a member of the International Advisory Board for SuPWR, and she'll introduce the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepta. It's a great privilege to be here to chair this panel, and we have a fantastic lineup of activists from these countries. The panel is going to be in the form of a question and answer to each panelist for about an hour, and then we're going to open up for Q&A. So let me start in reverse order. Panelists, we have Pallavi Sobti-Rajpal from India. Pallavi, hello. I can't see the screen, but Pallavi Utthan, a nonprofit modeled around fostering rural women's agency in India. She's led grassroots interventions in gender justice and sustainability over 20 years. She has a lot of experience in integrating community leadership, governance, intersectionality across a variety of sectors. Her most recent policy work has been contributing to the reformulation of the recently released Gujarat State Gender Equity Report, a very important contribution there. We also have on our panel Bhagavati Adhikari. Hello, Bhagavati, from Nepal. Bhagavati is a prominent advocate for women's land and housing rights in Nepal. She's also the executive director of Nepal Mahila Ekata Samaj, and has spearheaded numerous initiatives and campaigns aimed at securing land and shelter rights for women from landless and informal settlements. She also is a co-member of the Sangat, which is the South Asian Feminist Network, where she contributes to regional feminist movements. So welcome, Bhagavati. We are very honored to have you. Our third panelist is Jalila Haider from Pakistan. She is incredibly the first female lawyer and scholar from the Hazara people, which is a small minority community in Pakistan's Balochistan province. She addresses both human rights and women's rights issues in her legal and scholarly work. We are incredibly proud to have her on the panel. She's been included in the BBC's list of the 100 most influential women in recognition of her rights, her work on rights for women and human rights in her region. She's also won the State Department's International Women of Courage Award, WOC, in 2020. And finally, our fourth panelist is Nazia Jabeen from Bangladesh. She's a feminist and youth activist working for equal gender rights in Bangladesh. and has also been working as a communications professional with more than 11 years of experience. She also leads a nonprofit for young people, and it's really important to hear those voices as well in this conversation. So we will start with these questions. And I'm going to start with Sohela asking a question to Nazia. No, sorry, Priya asking a question to Bhagavati. Priya, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Anu. Bhagavati ji, I don't know if we can see you yet. Should we? Can you hear us?
Hi everyone, namaste. Yes, I can hear you, but my video has a problem, so I couldn't able to on my video. Sorry for that.
No, no problem. Really nice to have you, Bhagavati ji. Could you maybe start by telling us a little bit about NMES's relationship with the state? Because this is quite complex and has evolved considerably over the years from what you've told us. Because you do look to the state, for instance, for land titles, you rely on local government for service provision. A lot of the members of your network also contest elections. But on the other hand, the state is also a significant source of backlash in terms of forced evictions, demolitions, and police violence during protests. So if you can tell us a bit about how NMES views and engages with the state, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you so much for this space. Hi everyone. Sorry for I couldn't able to open the video, but my voice are being audible. So, um, okay. Nepal Mahila Samaj itself is the network of the organization of landless and informal settlement. So women from the landless and informal settlement, and we have been working on the advocating agenda on safe, secure, and shelter rights. So it has been 25 years that we have been working on this. This is the agenda of our own, as well as we are advocating for our own rights and for the people who are landless from this country. And we have been working in 15 districts. So during this time, we connect with care and ideas. And during our research process, what we have been facing is like there are lots of struggles that we have been facing, but it was we didn't, like we have been working on the movement from last 25 years, but that we found is we had lots of gap on the documentation. So during this research period of 5 years, we found that there were lots of backlashes, and also we used lots of strategies to overcome with that backlashes. One is in the policy, government acknowledged that there is a landless people in our constitution, in the land policy, in the government local policies. There has been clearly mentioned that there are landless and informal settlers. And also they had a specific plan on the national action plan also. But when it comes to the implementation process, then there is not any specific kind of implementation processes. We do have land commission, we do have a system, but because of a personal people interest and intention, it has not been implementing. So that is being a big challenge that we have been facing. And being a women network, we face a lot. Most of the time when we go for the government sectors and state to make them to heard our voice and demand, they don't used to, listen to us. And we have to make them to listen. So what we use the strategy is we lots of women, like more than 100 of women, we used to go in front of the government offices, and we used to do the delegation, chanting and all. And during this super research, one tool we able to introduce, one is through the drama performance. So that was one of the important tools that we able to use. And last 2 years, we have been using this as advocacy tool. Regarding the backlashes, in the research document also, like ideas will share you even in the ideas website also, we do have in our organization website also. Uh, we have been facing a forced eviction from government level, not from the corporates or private sectors, but we have been facing that forced eviction. However, it is linked with the corporate sectors. Like government has a plan of the development program of the developing a garden, developing a bridges, and like buildings and all. So because of that, indirectly, corporate sectors, but directly by the state, like municipality and ministry level, they don't used to share their notice. Directly they come with the bulldozers and they evicted. Even in 2012 there was a forceful eviction, and during that time 252 household of Kathmandu has been evicted within an hour. So there was two specific bulldozers with more than 3000 police and army were there on 2012. And in that, like like filmy kind of way, they used to come in the community, and without any notice, without any alternatives, without any discussions, they used to do the forceful eviction. After that, we had lots of advocacy, and on 2022, on November also, the same kind of incident happened, but that was by the Kathmandu municipality. So that was just some incident that we faced. But when we go to the different villages and districts, we found lots of forceful eviction to community people. There were not any alternative for the community people, and they had been like randomly doing those kind of decision and wants to like evict the communities. So that is the one. And what was another challenges for us is uh, within our network, like within the community team also, being a women network, we have to prove them that we are also one of the specific network that we can able to raise this voice. Like another network used to blame us that this is a women group, so they don't have that level of power and capacity to deal with this political agenda. So that kind of backlashes also we have been facing in our working areas, in our working like jurisdiction. And sometimes what we face is media, especially media is being on 2022 we got some support from media, but when it comes on 2012 there was lots of negative information. So because of that also we had to do lots of struggle with the government and to the public, because media is one of the major tool that they used to take message from media about landless communities. So because of that, we also had a challenges from the media. We couldn't able to get support, and also few challenges that those people who used to be a human right activist, they also used to say that um, this is a human right, but when it comes to the Kathmandu Valley, they shouldn't had to give the alternatives. So that kind of backlashes from in-house to the community to the state. So that level of backlashes we have been facing. Uh, and major what we found is like majorly is the intention that they used to look after to the community people is the major thing, because in the policy there is clearly mentioned that those people who have been staying from last 10 years, they will get the alternatives, they will get the options of and compensation. But when it comes to the implementation, we have been facing lots of challenges. So these are the struggles that we have been facing, and we have been doing strategic engagement with the government and bodies and political parties. We are doing a media advocacy and engagement plans, and some like young people to make the new leadership and creating a new kind of advocacy processes. So this is how we have been doing. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bhagavati ji.
Did you want to ask any follow-up?
Well, I wondered also if any of the other panelists had something to reflect on in relation to what Bhagavati ji said.
Yeah, I can't see the panel, but if somebody could see
Yeah.
if anyone had a reflection. Otherwise, I had a follow-up question. So thank you, Bhagavati ji, for a very, elaborate presentation. I'm wondering, have you noticed any patterns for when you engage with the state and have been successful? What has been the sort of ingredients that have helped you achieve those sort of gains? If you could reflect on that a bit.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. On last 25 years, one of the major achievement that we did is policy advocacy. So initially there was just mentioned that those people who were landless, of um, village area, they will be notified as a landless people and they will get the land rights. But through our advocacy, people used to migrate from village to the city area. They will be, they are being like migrated and they are being landless. Um, so their rights has not been addressed in the policy. So what we did is in policy, we mentioned about the informal settlers and the people who are landless in the city area also engaged and has to be addressed their rights in the policy. So that was one important like changes that we could able to do it. And another is we able to get support from the different women networks. Initially we were single, we were only one organization that we have been advocating, but from last 10 to 15 years we able to get the solidarity support from different networks, especially women networks. Like we do have NWHRD networks, we do have lots of human rights networks who able to um, who give the solidarity support not just from their organization but also from in the workshop, in the policy discourse, even in the write up also they able to like even some of the organizations they did the um, research based on the landless people, like what kind of reason are there. So in that way we also got some solidarity support from us. So because of that our agenda are being amplified in national and even in the international level also.
Very interesting. Thank you. We have a challenge in that Nazia hasn't joined yet. So we're going to move on to a question from Deepta for Jalila. So Jalila, over question to you.
Hi, Jalila. Thank you so much for joining. It's really nice to see you. Jalila was actually a visiting scholar at IDS for a few months. This has been a really long collaboration. Jalila, you work with the Hazara women's struggle, and of course, like there are many generations of Hazara women. The older generation, the younger generation, and so we were trying to figure out if you could tell us a little bit about some of the tensions that you might have felt in the movement, and how you've overcome that in terms of how has the Hazara movement built intergenerational solidarity, because that's something that is also a very important feature of most South Asian movements that we saw, was the fact that there are they become very personality led and individual women led, whereas I think in the Hazara movement you've managed to sort of like keep that quite broad based. So just wanted to ask you a little bit about how you've managed to do that.
Well, thank you, IDS. Thank you, Deepta, for your question. And yeah, I work with IDS, and my struggle is basically about highlighting the issue of Hazara women. The tension, I need to, first of all, define the context, because as compared to other movements throughout the South Asia or global, the issue of Hazara women struggle is a bit more diverse in context of struggling for visibility, for having recognition as a feminist, fighting against the tribal norms and patriarchy, and with the state is a things that happening around the Hazara community specifically, and Hazara women generally. So if we look into the tension, so the intergenerational transmit of solidarities that is built, that has been built, it is not a struggle of one day. In past 20 years, when we were documenting these struggles, that from where these Hazara women struggle emerged, how it converted into a feminist struggle. So we realized that it has a multi-dimensional struggle, like in right to life, Hazara tribe specifically, they were facing ethnic and sectarian genocide in Balochistan in past 2 decades, and everything emerged not so suddenly. It was realization for the survival, and when we started and the movement was built, it was initially we shift from the movement, we shift a violent movement into peaceful movement. For example, when there were attacks on Hazara people, so Hazara men used to be violent and they used to burn cities, and it was a kind of retaliating struggle. However, when Hazara women joined the public spaces, they struggled for right to life after attacks and bomb attacks by the terrorist groups. So it shifted from violent to the peaceful movement, and it was built throughout like past 20 years, which was in fact we can say that which could not got so much recognition in the feminist literature or the larger feminist perspective. However, the struggle started from the ground, and it was not a conscious struggle that they thought that it is a feminist struggle, but it was a struggle for the right of the life of the people, and it shifted to the feminist struggle. The tensions were, in fact, as I have mentioned initially, that the struggle was, the tension was not simply like that there was a pressure from the state side or there is crackdown from the state side, but also from within the community. The Hazara women faced a lot of backlash from within the community, religious groups, and there were a lot of backlash online and to the community spaces. Like we can see that Hazara women are not only fighting for their right and demanding it from the state, but also they are now in past 10 years it shift towards right to bodily autonomy, understanding their own liberation, and asking from the patriarchy and tribal setup that who are we and what is our recognition within these movements. Because we have seen that when any movement which was emerged by the Hazara women, actually it was actually led by Hazara women, was always hijacked by Hazara men, and not Hazara men only, but other groups who identify themselves as a Shia but not Hazara. They were replacing Hazara movement, and the women go invisible on the larger context of leadership and decision making. In relationship of building and creating bridge between these, Hazara women have started to realize their own power, and they have started asking for their stake in the decision making and initiating the movement. In past 6 years, it has emerged as a feminist movement, and they identify themselves as Hazara feminists because the nature of backlash, one coming from the state, like the crackdown on the activists. On the other side, it is from within the community, and it is not community who is the male, who is the female, but male community who used to put Hazara women photographs on the internet. The nature of backlash is like naming and shaming them, harassing their families, identifying their relationships with someone, or it's a kind of a complete movement. And then public space. Within public space, Hazara women when go to universities and workplaces, so the outsider who are not Hazara, because from within the community, the backlash and the social media campaign is too much intense that they consider that those Hazara girls who work in public space or go to universities and colleges, they are characterless, or like a kind of, we can say that fetishism of the minority women body is very common in Balochistan, specifically about Hazara women. The nature of the struggle of Hazara women is intersectional. We can see that it is a question of class, it is a question of power, it's a question of resources. So as being a minority and the relationship with the majority, Hazara women hardly got any despite the fact this movement has been built not in one day, but in past 20 years, that could not get that space as a feminist movement within the larger feminist movement of Pakistan, because one thing is the language, the education, the class, and economy, because Hazara women belongs from the peripheries of Pakistan, and the more feminist movement in Pakistan is urban centric, and the struggle is more getting recognized and focused on the urban centers rather on the rural centers, where women are fighting on different fronts. For Hazara women, when we look into the intergenerational solidarity, so it's not something that they could easily got it. But one thing that during our research paper, when we were asking and our focus group discussions, we realized that they have realized the power of the internet, and they were building solidarity, like when one woman was blocking the road, so they were using Snapchat or Facebook and coming live and sharing with other women to join them. And it was a peaceful tool that state could not crack down the way that it used to do on Hazara men for their right to life. However, there is a lot of backlash in form of blasphemy allegations, character assassinations, restriction of Hazara women within the public space, like families, when after the protests women go back to their homes, so the groups of men who feel threatened that they will come into the leadership positions, these women, or they will decide at their own and they are powerful, they start their character assassination, and it is a complete campaign. And unfortunately, we hardly see that state's intervention, despite making several complaints to the state. Yes, but state's role is very intense in the nature that state's involvement in the character assassination of Hazara women in a form that, like there was a case of Hidayat Khilji, a Pashtun man. Sorry, I just need to identify, for not to make it a racist thing, but to make the case for our research, that when his videos were leaked with few Hazara girls, which was like he was torturing these Hazara girls. So the videos were in the custody of the federal investigation agencies, but it was continuously being put on social media on Hazara communities pages, and they were provoking Hazara young men against the Hazara women. That, see, your women, you are like Beghairat, means like you don't have dignity. Hazara men is useless, and using so many things to provoke their honor against Hazara women. And as the result, we have seen that there were a lot of tortures within the public community, like if someone was dropping Hazara girl from office, so they used to stop them and beating them. So this was how state was playing with the sentiments of Hazara men against the Hazara women. And then the nature of the tribalism is very strong, which this Hazara women struggle has almost broken. And I feel that 80% of tribal norms has been broken after recognizing Hazara women struggle. So this is how that the entire Hazara women is intergenerational solidarity is shifted. The old generation and the new generation, they all feel together now to support each other.
Thank you, Jalila. That's really amazing, and thank you also for raising the idea of the digital as a space both for protest as well as for backlash, and that's something that is really important, and how, you know, at some point state intervenes and then sometimes it doesn't intervene when you want it to intervene in these spaces to shut down the backlash, especially of like allegations. It must be really difficult. But I just wanted to ask specifically about the digital then. You know, would it not be that the younger women are more able to do the digital? How do the older women deal with access? Do they have equal access to technology?
That's quite strange that they have access, their families have made accounts for them and they use it despite the fact that they don't know how to write, but they know how to come live and they make a voice recording or their videos and come live and say that, see, today we are sitting in a protest and because of that incident happened, or we are going to today we have event for our issues. So it's like, despite the fact that the older generation who are not much literate, they have a bit information about how to turn on their phones and record or the scenario and ask people to join them. So the new generation is more aware and they learn how to use hashtags and connect with the people more, and especially with the global solidarity. So they have learned a lot, and especially the educated class of the girls, they make their videos in English and in Urdu and ask the larger feminist groups to join them, and especially the journalists and other things. So that is something that we feel that this rapid revolution of the technology, despite the fact that it has very negative impact and it has affected majority of our women's mental health, because after when the movement is over, they face a lot of abuse, character assassination, slander, and online backlash. But still, that is something that it is giving voice to so many. So I think it is going equally, but as far as about the cyber security, majority are not aware of it, that how to take care of oneself when they are coming to the digital spaces and build a movement.
Thank you. Thank you, Jalila. Really fascinating account for, a very small group of minority women and how you can still sort of attempt to counter backlash. Pallavi, I believe you had a comment in the chat for Jalila, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, so thank you for having me here, and it's a very important conversation we're all doing. So, of course, like we said, like Deepta, you said, technology is a space of protest and also backlash. Similarly, working with, so in the reference to the first speaker, we were talking about what have been, some strategies which have worked while working with state. So, some of our experiences in India, in Gujarat specifically, have been that, a regular interaction with the state, duty bearers has really helped us in tabling the challenges faced by women, and also in tabling the how things have worked well. So I think a constant dialogue where you have people from both sides sitting together, and especially have survivors or those affected directly speaking up, and not say an organization like Utthan, but women or community leaders themselves raising those issues has been pretty useful. Another thing also is, public recognition in several of our community events of a work, of good work done by, say, even a village level revenue official, or of, the protection officer at the district level. That has, I think, been quite useful, because it motivates them when you give them the space and recognition, and then the others are there who want to replicate that. So these two have really helped us to work to receive positive support, where we're trying to again and again, say that this is something which we have to do collaboratively. So you invoke what is there in the law and in the legislation, also, but smartly bringing up what is really challenging, and what is impacting women or any other marginalized groups to really seek any sort of justice. Yeah, so these were the two things I wanted to share.
Thank you, Pallavi, and clearly very important experience coming from your engagement with the state of Gujarat. And welcome Nazia Jabeen, to this panel. The next question is for you from Sohela. Sohela, over to you.
I think I got a mic. Give that. Nazia, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you for joining, particularly after a long day of fasting. I hope you have had enough time to have some food and water.
It's okay. It's okay.
But thank you, for making the time after a long day. Nazia, so the question is easy and hard at the same time. All movements struggle with the issue of intersectionality. Not all of us come from the same position and engage with an issue. We have class issues. Younger women sometimes find it harder in feminist movements for engaging and sort of getting their voices heard. There is age hierarchy in South Asia. There are issues around religion, issues around sexuality, many different things come in, right? And the way we come together and build coalitions, because the Bangladesh cases we studied are coalitions, it is about then how the coalition represents and builds an inclusive agenda. And I know inclusion is a big word right now in Bangladesh, in the way we want to build new Bangladesh. So the question is more about how. So in the movement that you're involved in, and as a representative of younger voices, how did you build inclusive agendas? Which things worked and which things didn't? But also decision-making inside the movement, because not everybody sits in the leadership position. And it's about information sharing, it's about sharing of power. So if you could reflect on those issues.
Sure, and rightly said. You said it already. Like inclusion has been like one of the key issues that is currently like everybody is talking about it in Bangladesh, especially after the fall of the fascist regime we had last year. I'm sure that many of you already know that we are currently going through a lot of transition phase. And of course, it was the hope that was driving us like right after the fall of the government. We were really hoping to get like a new Bangladesh where it will be more inclusive. But however, like right now when I'm standing, it's not really looking that way. Still the hope is there, but still there has been like a lot of cases, a lot of crimes that has happened against women, especially in the past couple of months. That has really shaken us. And even this week, we have seen like mobs forming against women and mobs forming to get harassers out of custodies. So this is just happened just today. So we are seeing this happening, and when you are going through such a transitional phase, the situation, the law and order situation has not really settled down. So these things are like extremely worrisome. So just to set a context in where we are operating right now, and where I am working. I'm part of the Writer Right Now coalition, where there are like 7 organizations which are currently working together to form like a gender just society, and which upholds the sexual and reproductive health and rights of young people. And through these coalition partners, we are trying to create our inclusive. We have tried to create an inclusive agenda. I think inclusive is still like a very subjective term. So when I feel inclusive, because I work with a organization that works with gender diverse communities, and I understand that their unique needs are getting brought to the table. But it's not all the we are not really getting to hear from all marginalized groups. So I think like having an inclusive agenda is still like an ongoing thing, and of course we try to do better and better every day. But so far, what we have been able to do is we have brought the young people's voices to the table. So we are working with young women and girls, young men and boys, We are working with young people from gender diverse communities, from indigenous communities, from linguistic minority groups, and from religious minority groups, and also from young persons with disability. So we are trying to we have tried to bring these voices to the table, but still like an ongoing process. So we need to continue the process. Still, like we don't believe that because as we currently are working with funding and with the whole turmoil that the funding landscape is going through, we don't really believe that any kind of movement should be limited to like just a platform like Writer right now. So this is like a continuous process, and we need to keep bringing these voices to the table. And so that we have done so far, and we have also tried. We have also seen that the young people are taking the lead on being out there and doing um, doing a lot of work, doing a lot of work to uphold the gender justice in the country, to voice up their needs, their demands, and we are also seeing a lot of youth-led organizations and community-led groups which are coming forward and sharing their voices and sharing their concerns, which has shaped up the broader sexual and reproductive health and rights movement, the broader gender rights movement that is currently ongoing in the country. However, there's still some concerns regarding like tokenism. So because I work with diverse communities, they have shared that they sometimes feel like they are just there because of their identity, and they are not really valued for the diversity that they bring to the table. So there are also concerns about, as in the, it was like we did in the question, like there are like classism that still happens in the movement, where there is like a linguistic hierarchy, and sometimes it's like um, the people who are good in English, who are speaking on behalf of a community. So that also creates like a linguistic hierarchy among different groups, and so there are also concerns like that, and there are of course a lot of conflicts that happens within the groups, within the marginalized communities, because we see the communities that are suppressed, they they think of power as their approach to having power is something that's a lot desired, and sometimes that also creates a lot of conflict, and especially because a lot of these marginalized groups are under resourced, so there is also always like conflicts that arise, like who gets to have these resources in the first place. So I think a lot of these challenges are still out there. So we are trying to do as much as we can. I believe that it's also building an inclusive agenda, just to go back to that point. It also it depends on like being united. So being united in your asks. So sometimes the asks of more marginalized groups, within marginalized groups, those do not really come forward. So yeah, so even with the challenges, like we are still trying. Let's see like how far we can go. And yeah, so I hope that I have covered a lot. And if I have any question, I would definitely love to answer them. Thank you.
Nazia, you actually covered very comprehensively, because you spoke about the ways of inclusion and what does inclusion actually mean, because you touched on tokenism. So sometimes you're asked to come to the table, but you're actually not included. You talked about the issue about resources. So in terms of who has what, and then if you're in extreme marginalized groups, you may be very under-resourced and may not be able to speak up. You talked about the way we do inclusion. So in terms of language, class, who's articulate, who has access to the spaces where decisions are being made. And you touched on a very important issue, which is you said that RHRN shouldn't be the only platform, that there should be other platforms. And then you also touched on hope in terms of talking about that the demand is also coming from other groups and other youth-led and community-based groups, and how do you connect to broader agendas? So that's quite a lot there, actually. So my follow-up questions have two things, and you can pick whichever one you want to sort of elaborate on. One is you talked about internal conflicts within the group and having to manage that tension. So how do you do that? What are the processes? How do you navigate? If you want to touch on that, that is a sensitive question, I recognize. So if you don't want to touch on that, that's also fine. The other bit you talked about is building alliances, because you do need not just coherent coalitions, the coalition needs to connect to broader other movements and get allies in other places. So how do you do that? Because you touched on that, but didn't elaborate that. But in the current moment in Bangladesh, given what's going on, that would be crucial. So what are you thinking? What are you doing in that area? So whichever you want to touch, if you want to touch both of them, that's also fine.
Yeah, I think, so I'll start with the conflict, managing conflicts part. I don't have a lot to share, in a sense that a lot of this depend on what kind of conflict that happens. So we need to like strategize and re-strategize on how to reduce that. Of course, sometimes one of the things that I myself try to do is that I try to focus on, like I try to like kind of imagine this conflict as like a healthy conflict and try to see like if this conflict can be turned into something positive. So like a lot of discussion that happens with the parties that are involved in the conflict, things like that. And it takes up a lot of time, but I still feel that it's rewarding in a sense that sometimes people just need somebody to listen. And of course, just to maybe just to share a bit about like that that sometimes these conflicts arise from like some personal traumas as well, some personal asks that they are not getting receiving from the society in general. So, and then, but also like the mental health condition. So sometimes it's the activists who are getting in fight with each other because they are feeling this need to share because their mental health need has not been addressed because of the lack of services in our country. So we also try to do counseling in that way. Like we have experts whom we work with, and we try to like try to set them up together. Like the counselors become the negotiators sometimes in these cases. So yeah, so we have tried different strategies to just, I'm just telling about it very barely, but just to give an idea. The second point is on building alliances. We have really worked hard on this because we work with a community that has been historically marginalized, and not a lot of people would like, I mean, they would think first, like if working with, for example, the gender diverse community, will it bring any harm to myself? So I think that with I mean, there is a lot of negotiation that happens. We have, what strategy that has worked for us is that we have held sensitization workshops with these organizations, with our allies, and those and try to like explain how these communities live, what are their lived experiences, and just to build empathy around uh, the realities of these communities. And we have seen when there is like an understanding of our challenges, then they are more open to work. So but that takes a lot of time, to be honest. Like you need to work with them for years to get them, meet the community, to talk with them, to do these workshops with them. still, like, even if it takes time, it is still rewarding in that sense. Like, at the end of the day, you have an ally, and who can help you in a very difficult climate that you are operating in.
Thank you, Nazia. Those are excellent answers, particularly touching on the health-related issues, because extreme marginalized communities do have lots of trauma. And as you work on rights, obviously, you're also opening up trauma. And sometimes it is about holding those spaces for listening, but it's also about then how do you take and connect the different experiences for allies to understand where people are coming from. So it's not just strategies, emotions play a very big role in our movement building. So I don't want to hog all of your time. There may be questions in the chat from other panelists that may want to reflect on your points, or my fellow
Are there
panelists
questions
here.
in the chat from other panelists? So shall we move to the next speaker? Okay. So let's move on to our final panelist today, who brings rich experience, Pallavi. And I'm going to ask you this question, and Sohela, thanks for giving me a perfect segue into it. These movements, and in general, all civic movements, social movements, they're struggling, and these struggles take a long time, sometimes over decades. So, Pallavi, can you give us some insights into how your movement sustains its momentum when there's a lot of burnout and fatigue? Because you can be struggling for a long time and you have very little gains. Sometimes the small gains you get taken away very quickly. Sometimes it's more a case of one step forward and 3 steps back. So what are some of the lessons you've learned and the insights you have from working over 20 years with feminist movements in ways in which you can sustain their momentum?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's everybody's experience when you speak about the little gains and so many steps back when you take a few steps forward. So to begin with, of course, I have been myself associated with the women's movement, of course. But when we talk of grassroots movement, women's movement, I think it's important to share that we work as allies of the movement, because you yourself are not, for example, at the grassroots level. So, but you work as such strong allies that you are 24/7 living and being with the communities. And a lot of people who are part of Utthan are also drawn from the very communities we work with. So, this collective momentum, I think, you do get slow. You sit back, you tend to pause, and of course, feel dejected, of course. But I think what really, helps us sustain is the circle of trust and solidarity which we have built. And I think that is something, there is somebody somewhere in your solidarity or in your collective group which has a little more energy than you have on a particular day. And I think that is what really helps us sustain the spirit. And, then that becomes like a ripple, and it's an infectious cycle. So I think this, a strong collectives of people, wherever we are, whether we are in Bangladesh or, in Balochistan or, Gujarat, I think that is what, at least in our experience and in most of our experience, is what really helps us sustain. So I look at it in two ways, actually, that, if you have, because in such moments, what we need to sustain, we feel, is the strength and also the rage. So when we speak of, sustaining the strength, I think a lot of this collectivization, what I spoke about, is what has given us the strength. Again, intergenerational strength has also been useful, because, when there are newer people, younger people, there is this momentum which, when few people are tired, others take forward. So that has been useful for us. In so many of our Mahila Sangatans, which we support, the women's collectives we support, we've seen generations of women, like, you have the mother, for example, who was associated with the collective work. You have the daughter, for example, who's also joined in different ways. in many ways, sometimes in so many cases, the men have joined in some other, engagement. So I think this entire thing gives a lot of strength. A lot of women develop friendships amongst each other, and these are people who have gone through the same things, who have worked and resisted, and struggled together. So these friendships become so much stronger, and that's what gives strength. And of course, in the last few years, we've really tried to see how we can look at self care and care for others, where sometimes in the passion and in wanting to do so much, you try to really go overboard, and then it leads to burnout. And those are some things we've been trying to work on. Not, I won't say that we've been fully been able to master it, but some small ways and means where we're trying to see how we can look at care for ourselves and for each other. Of course, music and singing is something which has always helped us to sustain the strength. And I think what has really helped to sustain the why, or the rage to really continue all this to is women showing up every day, and staying informed about the various ongoings which happen, and how we can collectively take action. The other is also to actually ensure spaces. I think that has really worked well, is that if you ensure spaces where we are listening to each other, there is somebody every day who's doing something really unique, or there is doing somebody who is being really able to meet that resistance to do something about it, and then that gives strength to the other people. So I think this is what has really helped us to collectively stay together. And hope is something which I think is very important for movements to sustain. And without hope, really there is no action, I think. In fact, just some days back, we were having a conversation with somebody around hope and despair, and how do we really cope with all of this. And I think we ended up by saying that we don't have the luxury to lose hope. So yeah.
That's a very insightful comment, that you don't have the luxury to lose hope. Thanks, Pallavi. And I think, I mean, you pointed out a few things that were really critical. One is, of course, sort of recognizing the toll this takes and ensuring that there is enough care within the movement so that you don't sort of lose the momentum, and ensuring the spaces, ensuring that there are, usually in these movements, there are ebbs and flows. So making sure that the ebbs sort of overcome the peaks and the troughs, compensate for each other. And then I really like your point about, it's not just about sustaining the movement, but sustaining both the strength and the rage. So I think we're now opening up the floor to these panelists. We'll start with alternating questions from the floor and the online spaces. So shall we start with a question from the online audience? Priya.
Thank you. First, there was a reflection from Emily, who said that she loved the reflection from Pallavi, without hope, there isn't any action. So just to comment on that. And we have a question from Nafisa, that says, solidarity, Nazia. The rise of the right-wing fanatical Islamic forces like Jamaat is very frightening. It seems to be a very worrying climate for women. Do you think it is worse than before? Great to see younger feminists and activists doing great work and breaking the mold of the usual donor-funded activities. So Nazia, over to you.
Sure. So, thanks, Nafisa, for the question. So the question is like, do I think it's worse than before? I think I feel that it is, but because it's also, I don't want to give props to the previous regime, right? So sometimes, so now right now people are trying to use this narrative like we were better before than now, and it's giving credibility to the fascist regime. Just to set a context, like these fundamentalist groups have been raised, like expanding in their influence over the last 15 years under the fascist regime. And now they are just being a lot more visible than they were before. And now they are a lot more empowered by the lack of law and order situation. So right now I feel more unsecure. Even today when I was getting home, I was out and I started to feel very cautious about what I was wearing. And I was started to feel a bit paranoid, and I was looking at people like, what if something happens to me right now and things like that, because a lot of the cases in Bangladesh that are currently happening against women. I didn't feel that before, so I feel a lot more insecure. But that's also the responsibility of the interim government in place right now, to not to make me feel this much insecure. So yeah, so just to take a longer answer to a very small question, but I really wanted to set the context for that. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for a fascinating range of great presentations and contributions. So I'm Jörg Redstrom, work in the Power and Popular Politics cluster here at IDS, and also with the sibling program to SuPWR, which is Countering Backlash. And I'm going to ask the my mandatory man question. And because you said so many fascinating things about men in this, indirectly quite often, but obviously the problem in this seems for you as women's struggles, it is, you know, patriarchy. And some of you mentioned how your feminist approach is strengthened, and that then implies to me an analysis of patriarchy, which has to grapple with men and masculinities. And I heard some fascinating examples of men being manipulated and they're and attacking women in your communities, like the Hazara example, and sort of come back to Nepali landless women because they're women, presumably, possibly from men, and this online shaming and all of that, character assassination. So my question is really, as feminist movements and struggles or organizations, how do you think about and frame, and it's also related to this last question about alliances and allies and solidarities, how do you think about and frame men and or masculinities in relation to your work? Do you think about different kinds of men or men in different kinds of organizations that you ally with, and do you differentiate them? Because we've heard about governments and officials, we've heard about religious leaders and so on. There are obviously many different kinds of men in this whole scenario. So sorry, simplifying the question again, how do you think about men, and do you actively or strategically talk about and plan, strategize around how you relate to men and masculinity? Thanks. That's for anyone.
Thanks, Yaka. Any of the panelists who want to respond, please feel free to do so. It's not directed to any particular one, but maybe Jalila, you could start with a response.
Yeah, of course. I think without, let me turn on my camera. I think without, there are male allies too, but the patriarchy is too intense and powerful that sometimes we see that these allies, they themselves feel threatened from backlash and a lot of backlash from coming from the patriarchy or state. In our case, we have seen that there were and there are male allies who support Hazara women struggle, but they are not openly supporting it. Like can you hear me? Yeah, they are not openly supporting it when it comes about backlash. They just covering up, like talking about norms, and yes, they are good ladies, but if they follow our norms, or if they have, for instance, if a woman, she don't cover her head, so they say that yeah, she's a good feminist, she's a good leader, but still she's not covering her head. It would be better if she cover her head. So these type of things is like gaslighting the struggle of women. And we feel that there are feminist men, but they are very few, and they can we can make more solidarities. But unfortunately, in our research, what we realized that it is the male alliance or friends of women who don't want to claim it publicly that they are supporting the feminist movement. And that is so unfortunate that at the end of the day, it is only the women who suffer a lot. And despite the fact that this struggle is for the right of life of Hazara people, they suffer it all alone, and fight in every front, from state to within the community, inside the houses. This is something that we feel that we need more friends of our struggle, and build more solidarities. But it is a long way, especially if I talk about Hazara women. Thank you.
Bhagavati has her hand up, so I don't know if she wants to speak.
Yes, thank you for the questions. And yes, what we felt is regarding the masculinity and patriarchy. We just don't talk about the land right for women. We are being demanding for land right for all. So that means we are focusing on women. That doesn't mean that land will be only for women. That will be for men, for whole family. But that kind of politics, like from the community, from the network, and those male also, they don't understand those kind of things. So because of that, also we face lots of backlashes. But what we do is. We understand that because of their insecurity, it happens, and because of the what kind of environment they had been built up and like raised up, it based on that. So what our strategy is, what we do is, our advocacy is about the joint land ownership. That means it will be the ownership of the land entitled will be for the both men and women. So that makes sense that how patriarchal thoughts will cut off. Another is like we also do discussion and interaction with the men of community and also the political parties, that what are our perspective, and major our tool is like we do the evidence-based advocacy. That is the major power. Like data are the power for us. We go with the research document, we go with the case studies. So we have to prove ourselves that we are the advocacy that we have been doing is correct and the proper advocacy. So data is being more power for us doing the advocacy process, but still we have been facing those lots of challenges, but that kind of strategy that we have been building up. Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else online, or should we move to the next online question?
Yep, we can move to the next online question. We have a question from Titash, which says, is for anyone in the panel. How do feminist spaces cease to merely exist but thrive instead, especially in a day and age like today where these spaces are constantly shrinking and systematically funds are being cut? So, for example, what's happened with USAID. How do feminist spaces seek financial support at a time like this when the money isn't flowing as much this way at all? Because we all know that money matters a lot when it comes to movement building and keeping these endeavors alive. So whoever from the panel would like to respond. Thanks.
May I respond to this?
Yeah, please do.
So actually, when we talk about any movement or feminist movement, I don't think so that it should be or it can be fund driven. As far as Hazara women movement is concerned, so when there is sit-ins for more than 5 days or even 10 days, so that is the women who bring food and tea from their homes and support each other, and majority go to their homes and bring eat and again come and sit, and it is something that jointly they put a box and collect donations on the spot and manage their expenses during the movement. I don't the main reason of collapsing of the movement mostly in South Asia in recent times is the US aid, unfortunately, because they were relying on these aids, and as the result, when they ads, any form of ads, like in case of the Save the Children, it was closed in our province. So the child rights movement have been completely finished because it was funded. Relying on the external funds, but as far as the movement that we are building on the grassroots, it is not relying on external funds, rather like monthly donations of the members, or when there are incidents or the events that people join the movements, they support and contribute in the movement in form of the donations or bringing food or in form of the items and supplies. So that is how the entire movement always, majority of the time, it got successful as far as the concept of the negotiation with the state is concerned, or the with the authorities for the right to life or the justice or bodily autonomy. We can see that it is all these women who contribute. It starts from very minimum amount to the highest amount of donations. So that is how the entire movement is still standing, and it is more than now 22 years that Hazara women movement is growing, and without it is a work of volunteer and more with the solidarity and more with the community support. Community support means women community support.
Pallavi, you have your hand up.
Done.
Yeah. So what I wanted to just add is that while I agree with the what you said about fundraising from within and what we can do about that, that is also one important strategy. But I also feel that when we are talking about organizing marginalized women or marginalized communities as a whole, they are already intensively adversely impacted by so many other socioeconomic changes, including environmental changes. So there is definitely a need for resources, but I think we need to creatively also think and relook at the way we resource our work as well. So, for example, I think always expecting that there will be resources, direct resources for mobilizing and resisting, is not going to be so easy. So while we keep continuing to do that and push for that, I think uh, feminists need not, look away from economic models. We need to see how we can build economic security, for example, of marginalized institutions we are working with. So, for example, with us, what we are trying to do is to build, alternative economic models where, say, the collectives, one wing of the collective, for example, is working on a collective enterprise, looking at profit and doing that in a sustainable way, doing that in a just way, and then using those resources to fund their own work. So I think that is something we need to also look at. There are two different mindsets. It's always a struggle to look at when you're looking at profit and numbers, and when you look at rights. But I think we need to develop that and also include that in the list of strategies we use to resource our work.
Thank you, Pallavi. Any questions from our audience in the room?
Actually, just to reflect on this point and bring in one of the perspectives of another movement that we worked with as part of this project, the Bharatiya Muslim Mahila Andolan, a Muslim women's movement in India. And to sort of echo elements of both what Pallavi and Jalila was saying, a big challenge they faced recently is resource crunch, especially after a quite controversial position they took on legislation in India. They found that they had, were ostracized by also the dominant women's movement in India to a substantial extent. But while facing up to those challenges, something quite sobering that they said was that the greatest threat they faced wasn't so much the drying up of funds, but the drying up of hope. It was disillusionment and despair, and how that had set into the movement that they felt was in some ways what they were finding more difficult to overcome, and there was more creativity and possibility in finding resources than in addressing that sort of dissipation of hope within the movement.
Sohela.
Yeah, actually, it's to the point of resourcing. So one is, of course, thinking through what do we mean by resources? Because resource is not just money. Resource is also information, knowledge, and other things, right? The other bit is, of course, when we are talking about resources, which context and who are we talking about? So if it's a membership-based organization and you're a national movement, the way you resource and what you get from membership fees or the different models that you're going to have. Let's say you're a cooperative movement, a labor movement that employs a lot of women, and how you would then organize and where your funds will come from in terms of engaging in production and selling your products. That's a very different kind of challenge that you face in the current context than if it is about an issue where you also need to provide services. So for example, reproductive rights services. So if funding has been cut for and USAID has been funding it and your state then provides those services and you're part of that in terms of service provision, obviously that is going to be affected. So it's important to think through when we say resources and how do we thrive, what are we talking about? The key thing that I found in terms of working with feminist movements for such a long time is that the movement building work doesn't stop just because donors are not giving money. You keep doing what you're doing. Our movements exploit themselves quite a lot. I can think of lots of movements. I mean, I know that there are sort of questions that come up saying, oh, well, people bought big Pajeros in Bangladesh and this is what they did. They sold the rights agenda. I can tell you about many women's rights or activists and local level organizations who aren't riding Pajeros. And it is about going in rickshaws and it is about doing the hard work. And the hard work doesn't stop while the activists also do a 9-to-5 job, because this is about what you're passionate about, and you don't stop that work. But what it affects is whether you have access to global spaces, for example, certain kind of technologies and what the walls that are built in order to get access to where those spaces are and to be able to use that. If you're in the business of knowledge, feminist knowledge production, what does it mean when you're in the global south and you're an academic activist? Those are the kinds of issues actually we also need to think about when we say resourcing and thriving, particularly given that the oppositional forces that we are seeing, they are very, very well resourced. So that's the challenge where what we are up against. And of course, yeah, we need to think creatively, but whether that means engaging in businesses, whether that means looking at unusual sources for resourcing, or whether that means that your state hardwires in the sense that it has various accountability mechanisms. So your presence there is funded in a sense, your travel, your accommodation, your food, all of that. And that's not a favor that's given by the state, that is a claim or a right. So there are different ways of thinking about resourcing and how you channel your voices.
Thank you, Sohela.
We actually have a couple more questions online. Should I? Okay. So Emily asks, linked to Jurker's point, to what extent are you finding that the backlash is led or fostered by institutions? So for example, religious, political. And to what extent is some of the backlash led by rogue anti-institutional voices? So Emily's wondering if there are South Asian equivalents to Andrew Tate who speak to young men who feel alienated and disenfranchised from mainstream discourse.
Very interesting question. any of the panelists?
So I raise my hand and I can take this question.
Yes.
So, so I think first I'm not sure if it's institutional or non-institutional, but I can say what's happening in our country right now and who are the voices speaking against sexual and reproductive health and rights and women rights and gender rights in general. So though I actually see them as social media influencers who are backed by religious political groups. So who are a part of religious political groups who are spreading, so who are using all the all the things that social media influencers use, like posting regular contents, developing materials and things like that, developing videos, coming to live, and being trendy and things like that, and very much like being active voices against gender rights, against women, against diverse communities. And so we have these social media influencers who are developing books against organizations, against movements, against women, um, and then extracting materials from these contents to boost their follower base in social media. And Facebook, of course, has been at the forefront and is utilized the most by these influencers. And the kind of language that they use are very much appeals to the young men in Bangladesh who feel that they are losing control on the women. So I feel so that's what's happening right now, and this has increased manifold over the last 1.5 year, and we are seeing that it's increasing day by day. So they are very anti-gender, so they do not believe that a gender word should be used, and anything that's gender, they will immediately tag it with the diverse communities. So very much limiting or any kind of liberal voices, any kind of voices that speak up for women, speak up for marginalized communities, and harass and dox and uh, uh, make a unlivable space in the digital media for people who speak up. So that's what's happening right now in Bangladesh.
Should I ask the final question? Do we have some time? Okay, great. This question is from RT. This is a really insightful session. My question to the panel is, how can we ensure the genuine social agency of individuals, particularly those from marginalized communities, in sustaining meaningful involvement in social movements or protests, especially in an era where tokenism often reduces their voices to symbolic representation rather than genuine participation and empowerment?
Put to the panel. What are your insights for this? Should I call in someone?
Yeah, can I?
Go ahead, Pallavi.
Yeah, should I take the question?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a very important question, and I think the most, I think the best way to really ensure this is really to see that, the way we are, for example, planning interventions, or the way we are planning the agenda of movements, how they are being, designed and really led by communities themselves, rather than, people who are not represented, and, they taking the power in their hand. So I think it is really important to invest in leadership building, in just basically providing the power and space for people who are affected the most to really share their issues, or to lead the movements. Let them be the face, and be how others can really then be supporters and facilitators, rather than hogging the limelight themselves. So I think that is, one of the most important things which we could do. Even I think in, for example, even in organizations like us or movement like ours, when we are trying to, evaluate what we are doing, how useful it has been, the need is to really speak to the communities we work with and not just fancy evaluative programs. So unless we have, communities and people who are affected and whom we claim to be working for, part of such, analyses and discussions, I think it really doesn't serve the purpose.
Thank you, Pallavi. I don't know if any of the other panelists want to have a comment, but we're a final comment, perhaps? No? Okay. In which case, I'm going to sort of close the session a bit and then hand over to Deepta. I think we've heard a lot of very interesting reflections on the women's struggles, and particularly at this moment in time when, the space for women's rights groups to make any claims is shrinking so fast. And it's not just for women's rights, it's for all kinds of rights. So it's in a sense a very critical context where we are in ICU in some senses, but it's also an opportunity, I think, and we need to think of it like that as an opportunity to make alliances with other groups who are also sort of in a position of being having their voices not heard. And so making these alliances, building solidarities in movement work, obviously there are points in time when you have a lot of gains and points in time when you retreat and sort of build your own strength again. And this might be one of them. So with that, as International Women's Day is around the corner, I hope that everyone takes away some of the energy from these movements, but also some of the hope that they represent in countering backlash. And I'm handing over to Deepta to have some final words.
Thanks very much, Anu, and thank you very much to all our panelists and all the participants online as well as in the person. Just wanted to close with a few comments, just in terms of like really the opportunity for our alliances and looking at our supporters and facilitators. We have done this research with 4 organizations: CARE in Nepal, Institute of Social Studies Trust in India, BIGD in Bangladesh, and Ideas in Pakistan. And these are, the speakers today that you've seen and who've given up their time are only 4 of 16 women's movements. We have much more on our website, so please do go have a look. We also have an exhibition that's going on online, which is there, but also at IDS. So if you've not had a chance to look at it, please do look at that. And just wanted to really thank all of the women's movements and especially our 4 participants for allowing us to be a part of this journey, because it has been a really intense journey. It has also had like every other movement, we've made friendships, we've shared food and energy and hope, but also shared despair and but we really are looking forward to more engagement and building coherent coalitions, building coherent alliances, and sustaining, like Pallavi said, both our strength and rage, but always with care in terms of thinking about how we take care of ourselves and of everyone else. And thank you very much for our 4 speakers. Again, you've been inspirational, you've been incredible, and yeah, we send you lots of love and lots of solidarity and lots of rage. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.